Imagine a world where people build massive structures, pyramids that reach toward the sky. Thousands of people living together in a city. They trade, they celebrate, they pray. But something is missing, something that we find in almost every other ancient civilization. There are no weapons, no fortress walls, no traces of war. About 5,000 years ago, when Egypt was building its first pyramids, a civilization existed on the other side of the world that was just as old, perhaps even older. And this civilization apparently knew no war. That sounds impossible, but the evidence is real. Welcome to Caral. We are on the west coast of South America, in present-day Peru. About 200 kilometers north of Lima lies a dry valley, the Soup Valley. Here, between desert and mountains, rise the remains of a forgotten city. The city is called Caral, and it changes everything we thought we knew about the early history of America. For a long time, historians thought that the first complex societies in America emerged much later. People spoke of the Maya, of the Aztecs, of the Inca. These cultures are famous. The whole world knows their temples and pyramids. But Caral is older than all of them, much older. Archaeological investigations show that this city emerged around 3,000 years before our era. That means Caral is approximately 5,000 years old. At the same time when the Egyptians began building their great pyramids, people here in Peru were also constructing monumental structures. Two civilizations, two continents, the same time, and yet neither knew of the other. The Soup Valley is a narrow strip of green land between the coast and the Andes. A river brings water from the mountains. Without this river, the land would be desert. The people who settled here understood that. They used the water, they learned to cultivate the land, and they began to build something extraordinary. Caral was not the only settlement in this region. In the Soup Valley and along the coast, several places emerged around this time that were connected to each other. Researchers speak of the Caral soup culture, or the Norte Chico culture. But Caral itself was apparently the center, the largest city, the most important place. And here we find the most impressive remains. When one walks through Caral today, 6 large pyramids are visible. They are not as pointed as the Egyptian pyramids. These are stepped pyramids with flat platforms. The largest of them is about 18 meters high and has a base area of over 100 meters in length. That is massive, especially when you consider that these structures were built 5,000 years ago without metal tools. The people of Caral had no wheels. They had no pack animals. Everything was moved by human power, stone by stone, sack by sack. Archaeologists have discovered how they built. They filled mesh bags made of woven reeds with stones. They stacked these bags on top of each other to construct the pyramids. This technique was clever. The bags distributed the weight evenly, and they made building faster and more efficient. Thousands of these mesh bags were found during the excavations. They tell of countless hours of work, of community labor, of an organized society. But what were these pyramids for? Historians believe they served religious and ceremonial purposes. Rituals took place on the platforms. People gathered here for special occasions. They celebrated the seasons. They honored their gods, or whatever they worshipped. We do not know exactly. This culture left no written language, at least none that we know of. There are no texts that tell us what they believed. What we do find, however, are clues. In the ruins, archaeologists discovered remains of fire pits. Offerings were burned here. Remains of plants, animals, and other materials were found. These sacrifices were part of religious life. They show that the people of Caral led a rich spiritual life, even if we do not know the details. A particularly fascinating find are small flutes and whistles. They were made from the bones of llamas and birds. Archaeologists found dozens of them. Music apparently played an important role in this society, perhaps in ceremonies, perhaps in daily life. The sounds of these flutes echoed through the valley 5,000 years ago. Today we can only guess what melodies were played. But how did the people of Corral live in daily life? The answer begins with the sea. The coast is only about 25 kilometers away, and the sea was rich in fish, especially anchovies and sardines. The coastal inhabitants caught these fish in large quantities. They dried them and traded them with the people inland. In return, they received products from the valley. A trade network emerged. The most important trade item from the Soup Valley was cotton. The farmers of Corral grew large quantities of cotton. From this cotton, fishing nets were made. Without nets, no fishing. Without fish, no food for the coastal inhabitants. Without cotton, no nets. A perfect cycle. Fish for cotton, cotton for fish. Both sides needed each other. Besides cotton, the people also grew food crops, beans, squash, and sweet potatoes. These plants were important for the diet. Interestingly, archaeologists found hardly any evidence of corn. Corn later became one of the most important plants in South America, but at the time of Corral, it apparently did not yet play a major role. The society of Corral was not equal. There were differences between people. The larger houses were closer to the pyramids. Important people probably lived here, perhaps priests or leaders. The simpler houses were farther away. Here lived the workers, the fishermen, the farmers. A hierarchy existed, but how exactly it functioned, we do not know. There were no kings that we know of, no rulers whose names have been preserved. These people left no inscriptions, no gravestones with names. What they did leave behind, however, are quipus. These strange objects consist of strings with knots. Later, the Inca used quipus for their accounting and communication, but in Corral, we find the oldest known examples. These knotted strings are about 5,000 years old. Historians believe they were used to record numbers. Perhaps they counted goods. Perhaps they documented trade transactions, or taxes, or religious calendars. The exact meaning of the knots remains a mystery. And now we come to the greatest mystery of all: peace. In the excavations of Corral and the surrounding settlements, archaeologists found no weapons, no spear points for killing, no war clubs, no shields, no fortress walls around the city, no trenches for protection from enemies. And in the human remains, they found no traces of violence, no crushed skulls, no arrowheads in bones, no signs of war. This is extraordinary, almost unbelievable. In almost every other early civilization, we find evidence of conflict. War seems to be part of human history. From Mesopotamia to China, from Egypt to Central America, everywhere people fought against each other. But in Corral, apparently not. At least we find no evidence of it. How is this possible? How could a complex society exist without war? Historians and archaeologists discuss various theories. One possibility is the trade network. The people of the Corral Supe culture were closely connected to each other through trade. The coast needed the valley needed the coast. War would have destroyed this system. Perhaps the people recognized that cooperation brought more than conflict. The fish trade was more important than any dispute over land. Another possibility is religion. Perhaps the people of Corral had religious beliefs that promoted peace. The great ceremonies on the pyramids brought people together. They created a shared identity, a shared belief. This could have prevented conflicts. Or the explanation is simpler. Perhaps the region was so isolated that no external enemies threatened. The desert to the west, the mountains to the east. Who would attack? And within the community, there were perhaps enough resources for everyone. No reason to fight. However, we must be careful. The absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. Perhaps there were conflicts that we simply cannot find. Perhaps weapons were made of wood that has long since rotted away. Perhaps battles took place at other locations that have not yet been excavated. Research continues. New discoveries could change our picture. But to this day, the statement remains. Corral shows no signs of war, and that makes this civilization unique. The city of Corral existed for about 1,000 to 1,500 years. That is a very long time, longer than many modern states. People lived here, built their pyramids, celebrated their festivals, conducted their trade, generation after generation. But at some point, it ended. Around 1,800 years before our era, Corral was abandoned. The people left. The pyramids were no longer used. The sand began to cover the ruins. The city disappeared from history. What happened? Why did the people leave their home? Archaeological finds show signs of environmental changes. The climate of this region is not stable. El Niño sometimes brings extreme weather events. Heavy rains can cause floods. Droughts can destroy the harvest. Earthquakes regularly shake this coast. In the ruins of Corral, archaeologists found traces of earthquakes, walls that had collapsed, floors that had shifted. The region lies in an active earthquake zone. Strong earthquakes could have damaged the pyramids. They could have destroyed the irrigation system. Without water, no harvest. Without harvest, no food. Other researchers believe that the river changed its course. Rivers sometimes alter their path. If the water no longer flowed where people needed it, they had to leave. The land became uninhabitable. Or perhaps it was a combination of several factors. Earthquakes and drought and floods. Too many disasters in too short a time. The society could no longer recover. The people moved away. To other valleys. To other places. They took their knowledge with them. Their traditions lived on in other cultures. But Corral itself was forgotten. Millennia passed. The pyramids remained standing, but no one remembered them. The Spanish conquerors came in the 16th century. They perhaps saw the ruins, but they did not understand their significance. They were searching for gold, not knowledge. Corral remained hidden. Only in the 20th century did systematic investigations begin, and only in the 1990s did researchers recognize the true age of this site. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials provided the surprising result. Corral was not a few hundred years old. It was thousands of years old. It belonged to the oldest urban centers in the world. This discovery changed the history of America. Before Corral, many historians thought that complex societies in the New World emerged much later. Now we know that America produced great civilizations at the same time as the Old World. Egypt and Peru, Mesopotamia and the Supai Valley. In parallel, people developed on different continents. They did not know each other, but they achieved similar things. In 2009, Corral was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The international community recognized the significance of this site. Today, visitors come from all over the world to see the pyramids. They wander through the ruins and try to imagine what life looked like 5,000 years ago. The excavations continue. Archaeologists are still working in the region. Every excavation season brings new finds, new questions, new mysteries. The picture of Corral becomes more and more complete, and yet large gaps remain in our knowledge. We do not know what the people called themselves. We do not know what language they spoke. We do not know what gods they worshipped. We do not know how their leaders were chosen. We do not know why they really did not wage war. These questions may never be answered, and perhaps that is okay. Perhaps we do not need all the answers. Corral reminds us that our ancestors accomplished amazing things without modern technology, without writing, without metal. They built cities that lasted for millennia. They created societies that lived in peace, or at least in what appears to be peace. The pyramids still stand in the Supai Valley. The sun rises over them, just as it did 5,000 years ago. The wind carries sand over the ancient stones, and the silence speaks of a time that we can only sense. The civilization as old as Egypt, a society without visible war, a people who made history without ever writing. Corral poses questions to us that we cannot yet answer. Perhaps future discoveries will bring more light. Perhaps one day we will understand how these people lived and thought and believed. Until then, the pyramids will remain standing, silent witnesses of a forgotten time. They remind us how little we really know about the past, about the people who came before us, and about the many stories that are still waiting to be told. The story of Corral is not yet finished. It has only just begun.